Welcome back to our book study, The Perfume of Silence. For some of you, you're brand new here. This is your first time because Francis was here last week live. Welcome back to we ended up our book. Okay, we ended up adding about 200 people back to our registration roster, and thank you all for signing up to be part of the book study. It was Jenny, and Jenny, thank you. Welcome back. Jenny is our co-host and very important. I say that Jenny is Rupert in a woman's body suit. She is so well informed, and actually, she's even more. She knows she's like the non-dual or Francis and Rupert librarian. Thank you, Jenny, for being here.
Thank you, Bill. It's lovely to be here. I always enjoy our meetings together and enjoy seeing you all.
Yeah, great. This is important. Jenny wrote to me yesterday or recently and said, since we missed the second half of chapter 13, might be a good idea to go back and look at that because there's so much there. And so we're going to look at the second half of chapter 13 about starting page 194 and then move. There's so much content. I don't know if we'll go to 14, but we'll see what happens. And maybe we'll just move into a few pages in chapter 14. And thank you for that suggestion, Jenny. When I went back and reread those pages, I was blown away. In fact, this is the section that has the title of this chapter, the peace. That peace is the universal container for everything.
Yes, yes.
Yeah. So it's just a beautiful, we have a really great read and communication with Francis in these pages. And I noticed in these pages, you probably noticed it also, he has some teaching here, some suggested, almost like investigation practices to give us that help us to connect with what he's talking about.
Yes, there's a lovely long investigation which goes very carefully, step by step. So that's something I think we do need to look at. So I'm very glad that we're going back to this the second half of this chapter.
Yeah, it's great. Well, it looks like we're adding people to our to our group as a result of Francis coming last week, and I just want to, before we get started, I want to welcome all the new people that are here today. Thanks for taking the prompt and joining us for the. We're almost finished with this book. We're on the second half of chapter 13. We have been together for 26 weeks, I think. Last week I thought it was 18. It's 26 weeks. We're going to finish around August 24th or maybe the last week in August. And then we'll be offline for about a month, and then we're going to start another book study that is sponsored by Rupert Spira. He's asked me to do a book study that is going to be talking about his meditation series, and he was waiting for his latest book to be published in the United States in September and then the UK in November before we start that book study, and then it'll be offered on his website. So thank you all for being here, and Jenny, I'm going to ask you to tell us where we want to get started.
Well, let's start where we left off the week before last. So that's on page 198, and that's Kindle on 175. And there's a question. I understand there is nowhere to go and nothing to do, but a kind of laziness has crept in, accompanied by a feeling that everything is all right. So we all start from the belief that we are a separate body-mind, but at some point we begin to feel that there must be something more, and we end up in ultimately in a teaching like this, which says you are already what you seek, and that, I think, is the starting point for this question. You are already completely free, unlimited in space and time. But even when we see that this is a possibility, and that's the first step, to see that is a possibility. There can still be a very strong attachment to the belief in being a separate entity, and that attachment can just carry on resurfacing, even when we are beginning to feel quite sure that we're not. But Francis says, well, once that belief is completely abandoned, then there really is nothing to do. He says on page 198, when we deeply understand that there is no personal entity that is bound, who seeks freedom or is liberated, then we are in the final stretch. That is the direct path. It doesn't mean that everything we have done before was unnecessary. Every single element of the journey was necessary to take us there, but now there is nothing to do. And once we are there, why worry?
Yes. I like that statement. I put a big circle around it and a star. When we deeply understand that there is no personal entity that is bound, who seeks freedom or is liberated, then we are in the final stretch. So I would just, when I read that, I just sort of give pause to that barometer, or that investigation. And I do it for myself when I read statements like that, and it sort of helps me, and that's why I think these studies can be so valuable, because it helps to to check in with our own direct experience, and that these pages sort of reveal the subtle mind that tries to creep in and take credit or identify itself as a consciousness. There's a paragraph, Jenny, that is right before that on page 198. That is it's the second paragraph at the top of page 198. And Francis was answering that the previous question that says, if what you say is true, then I should be able to change places with you. I thought that was pretty funny, but I don't think that would work. And I sort of did what this questioner was saying, and I thought it was interesting. His answer, he said, it wouldn't work simply because you think it wouldn't work.
Yes.
That's kind of wild, isn't it? It wouldn't work simply because you think it wouldn't work. What makes this perspective seem likely is our assumption that consciousness is personal.
Yes, yes.
So we take that assumption that consciousness is personal, and that's the subtle misunderstanding that these questions and these investigations reveal, is that we take the perspective that our assumption that consciousness is personal.
And he says later in that answer, he says, if we take the infinite and universal quality implied by the word God, together with the intimate and direct connection we feel when the word consciousness is used, then we are closer to the truth. It removes the unlikeliness, the impossibility.
Yes. Yes. I love that, the way he points to that when you read it and then you try it for yourself. When you use the word God, it does seem like it's out there. I mean, in general, when use the term God consciousness, it does bring it closer.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah. And then on the next page, what I was referring to that I thought was really cool, he says in that second paragraph, however, when we talk about consciousness, we evoke this experiential connection with it because it is our I amness. Perhaps we should use a different word like God consciousness and that or divine consciousness. And I like for me, I like God consciousness because it fits with a an idea that I like to say that you are what God is.
Yes, yes.
That fits
Mm.
that idea.
It does, yeah.
So continuing, do we want to back up on 195? Did we look at there was a or 194? Did we talk about that question on 194 where it says, "Is there only one viewpoint?"
I
There
think we
is.
did discuss that. Yes,
Oh, we talked about the dimension
I,
of the sacred.
I think so. Yes.
Okay, okay. I
Yeah.
thought we missed that.
Yeah.
So are we on? Where are we? Are we on 196? We skipped a few pages.
Well, 190, well, 198. I think was where we got
Okay,
to.
I think I was
Yeah.
going backwards. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
Okay, so on page 199, there's a question at the top of the page. It says, I don't know why my eyes aren't focusing as well today. A doubt came in that there was something to do, the questioner said. And then Francis comes in and says, the idea that there is something to do always arises from the feeling that things are not right as they are, that they should be different. That sounds like the human condition. That is what we have to investigate. This idea always comes from the notion that happiness and peace are dependent on circumstances, so that changing the circumstances would enable us to find them, to find happiness and peace. However, everything that is present now is already present in peace.
And I think that that can seem difficult when we are in difficult circumstances. We think, oh, if only I could have more money if we're struggling financially, or if only I could have a healthy body, or if only I could have a better job working with nicer people when we're working with difficult people. So I think that I think this is hard, but it's something that we learn over time, and we learn through experiencing again and again and again that when those circumstances go, still we don't have that imperturbable peace that can't be disturbed. The some different problem will then come up shortly. So what we're really looking for is something that can never go, can never disappear.
Yeah. Yes. This is where he says peace is the universal container of all things. We do not have to secure peace. It is the stuff of which everything is made. When that is understood, we no longer try to change things because we realize the situation is already made of peace. It is pure peace.
Yes, yes.
So we're abiding in that explanation. We're abiding in in peace. We're abiding in what we are.
Yes, yes, exactly. Yeah. I like the next question. Does impersonal consciousness take part in the enjoyment? This morning in meditation, a bird sang, and it was very clear, very beautiful. And then it sang again, and it was just the sound outside, and the appreciation of the beauty had stopped. It's I think this is, such a common experience. I'm sure we've all experienced that. Before we retired, Richard and I always went on holiday to a different place every single year. So we never go back to the same place twice, however beautiful it was. And it was precisely to avoid this situation happening. So Francis explains that the problem arises because we ascribe beauty to the object and fail to see that it's an inherent attribute of consciousness. He says it's a game of hide and seek that we're playing with ourselves. What we are is teasing us and is appearing in the most unlikely places because of its universal power to be everywhere. If we believe it is in the birds, it won't be. If we believe it is not in the birds, it shows up there. In this way, it teaches us how to be multidimensionally open without any choosing.
Beautiful.
Yes.
So we're learning how to be multidimensional,
Yes.
and there is no chooser. We're learning to allow the idea that there's no chooser.
Yes. Yes.
Beautiful. Well, we will welcome everyone that's here. We have quite a few new people that have not been with us. We usually have about 45, 50 people. So we're over 20 people larger for this week since Francis came last week. Welcome everyone that is new. We're going to continue the Perfume of Silence. We're on chapter 14. Someone was asking at what page on Kindle. And
Anne has given the answer, so thank you, Anne.
yeah, thank you for that. So actually, we're on the second half of chapter 13 because we had Francis last week, and we go to about August 24th. We may add a week there if we just to finish up the book. And I think we're on page 200 now.
Yes, yes.
There's a question at the top of the page of 200. If we are fully aware of a thought, we are free of it. Or this is the question. If we are fully aware of the concept of being a personal entity, would we not be free? It is as though the separate entity is not fully looked at. And Francis agrees exactly. It takes place at two levels, the level of thoughts and the level of feelings. At the level of mind, thoughts arise that involve this notion of being separate. The fact that they arise is not a problem at all. The fact that we give them credibility is a problem. And skipping down to the last paragraph, he says, we have to reach the stage when, if asked, what we are, no image or sensation could possibly arise to answer the question. We immediately, instinctively feel, I don't know. This question connects us directly with our most intimate reality, free from all images. That to me is like uh, that's where Francis shows up every time.
Yes, it's I think the most important thing I learnt from Francis, what it really means to live in not knowing. It's a quote from Jean Klein, live in not knowing.
Yeah, yeah,
It's beautiful.
yeah. And there's another, oh, I love this next question, or what Francis, how he answers this next question, and the statement that he says that to stay on the razor's edge. This kind of, that caught my attention because it's sort of it's a do this, stay on the razor's edge. It says the images I have of myself seem to have such deep roots. It seems almost impossible not to think of myself as something.
Yes, and he gives such a lovely long answer, which is an investigation in itself. About it's about seeing clearly what's happening in the mind and the body, but not trying to change it. And there's really I counted 10 steps in this, and maybe it would be nice to go through those steps
Yes,
together. And
yes.
yes, so let's do that. So, are there currently any personal thoughts or personal feelings? He points out that practical or creative thoughts or thoughts about the truth don't count as personal. They're not personal. And then if we see that there are personal thoughts or feelings, then don't try to escape from them or eliminate them or become subservient to them. But just ask, am I looking for truth or for a pleasant state? And if we're really looking for truth, then all states become neutral. And if we really look at that, look at our current state, if we find it's pleasant rather than neutral, then just see if there's a desire to hold on to it, to maintain it. Or if it's actually unpleasant, see if there's a fear or a sense of lack.
And then just remain as the seer of that.
Yes, exactly. And then, but as the seer, he says in both cases, it points to a hidden tension in the body. So it's worth then looking deeper and seeing, can you see this tension? Can you feel where that tension is? So if you're either seeing your current state as pleasant or as unpleasant, in both cases, there may be a tension in the body which is supporting that feeling. And then he goes on, are we looking for an enlightenment event that we can observe happening? And if we are, then it's it's helpful to remember that it doesn't really work that way. It didn't work that way for Francis. It didn't work that way for me. It's things. It just glimpses just happen. You can't see them coming. You can't promote their coming. And then he says, see that we're all already the light. There's nothing to be achieved. We're already the light. So there's no real enlightenment event. All that happens is just the uncovering of that light. And the way to uncover that is surrender everything that arises, thoughts, feelings, bodily sensations. Surrender all of that to the light of pure presence in which they appear. So we're not trying to find anything or make anything happen or know anything different. He says, just stay in not knowing. And then finally, Francis says, don't hold on to anything, any method, any thought, any feeling, any bodily sensation, any sense perception. Let it flow. Make sure that there isn't a subtle expectation at the level of the body that some sensation you don't like is going to evolve in the way you would like it to evolve. We're always expecting something different, and it's expecting something different that gets in the way. There's a lovely meditation, some of you might have done this, that he did, which is on YouTube. I think it's called The Flow. It's certainly got flow in the title. So this is a beautiful investigation which we can go through. We can go through something similar any time we feel, oh, I've sunk into ignorance. We just go through some of these steps.
Yeah, I like using. I mean, he is really giving us a very beautiful teaching and a model for investigating what's going on.
Yes, and it's one we can adapt to our own circumstances at the time, adapt to what's important for us.
Wow, thank you for presenting it that way, Jenny. And I haven't looked on the chat to see if we have any questions. If anyone has any questions, please write in the chat. And people are helping others with page numbers. That looks about it over there. We had a question. Are we past a question that Rick? You had a question that you wrote in. Is that question still relevant to what we're talking about? And while we're waiting for Rick, the next question, I thought this was a really great question. It says, there is a great freedom, or statement actually, that Francis answered. There is a great freedom in the I don't know. It is such a relief to give up knowing. And Francis gives I mean, I love his answer. It is beautiful. We are innocent like a child. This is sort of, I mean, this is what Jesus said also. that we accept the kingdom of heaven like a little child. And this is really what he was pointing to as the kingdom of heaven is the knowing of your own being, the beingness. And this one-liner, Francis said, you could say that when we know, we don't know, and that when we don't know, we know.
Yes, yes.
So we see things upside down.
Yes, yes, exactly. And not knowing is something that Jean Klein talked a lot about, and I think I previously mentioned his book, Open to the Unknown, which is my favorite of all of his books. That would make a great book study sometime, Bill. It's beautiful. And so Francis, who was a student of Jean Klein, he also emphasizes it. Rupert never really mentioned it, so I never really thought very much in terms of not knowing. I mean, I read what Francis said, and then at one point I thought, no, this is important. And I asked Rupert about it, but the answer wasn't quite right. And then, so it was the last question I've ever asked Rupert, and it's was, what does it mean to live in not knowing? And it's the first question that I asked Francis. And to me, that living in not knowing, what Francis showed me was exactly that complete freedom, tremendous freedom. The two go together, freedom and living in not knowing.
Yeah. That can also be a litmus test of a sort, because you can investigate, do I have an attachment to knowing?
Yes, yes, exactly.
Yeah, and then the next line, for everyone that's new this week and that has come in late, just know that if you came in late, you will receive an update from the host in your email that will have an attachment to the YouTube video that has this entire broadcast. So if you're new and you don't know that, be looking for a second email within an hour after the broadcast. I send that out manually so that you have a connection to the playlist for the entire book study. And at the bottom of page 202, there's a question or a comment. A lot of comments in this part of the chapter,
Yes,
and
yes,
and not as many questions.
yes. That's right. But it's the way he elaborates on those comments that's really beautiful, isn't it?
Yes, yes, because it's engaging. He's engaging the student, and it's very helpful for us because the questions or comments are often amazing. Sometimes I see I am as, let me put my glasses back on. Sometimes I see I am as a function, a witnessing. Okay. Yep. Even if we say it is a function, Francis says, it is still limiting because it has a dynamic quality to it. It is also a universal rest. Oh, I love how he refers to the book of Thomas here, I think.
Yes.
Jesus says in the book of according to Thomas, Jesus says to his disciples, if they say to you, where have you come from? Say to them, we have come from the light. If they ask you, what is the sign of the light in you? Say to them, it is a movement and a repose. Not only a movement, not only a repose.
Yes.
And on the next page, if you're looking at the book at the bottom of page 203, Francis gives an answer. The repose is the invisible presence of the mirror.
Yes, yes. And Ellen recommended to me a very lovely edition of St. Thomas's Gospel with a commentary by Cameron McColl, who actually studied with Francis. So I'll show you
Oh,
that.
good.
That's the book. So it's worth looking that up because it's absolutely lovely, and the commentary is entirely in keeping with Francis's teaching. It's very, very good.
Good. Thank you for that suggestion. I'll have that book ordered today.
Well, thank Ellen for that suggestion.
Oh, good. Oh, that came from Ellen?
Yes, yes, it did. Yes.
Okay, cool. The top of the next page, 203, we have about 25 minutes left. If anyone has any questions, please raise your hand or put a question in the chat.
Well, Rick has put a question. Would you like us to cover that?
Yes, yes, yes. Thank you.
Yes, he said, what does it mean to understand? There's always a sense of relaxation and peace, however subtle, inherent in understanding. This seems to be true, even if it's an inaccurate understanding. That's inaccurate from a phenomenal perspective. Can we elaborate? And really that peace and relaxation that comes from the ending of the question. Before there's an understanding, there will always be a question or some kind of doubt, and that leads to the understanding, and it's the dissolving of that that produces the relaxation in the body and the mind. The mind no longer needs to think about it, and the body no longer has that tension which is caused by the question. So it actually makes no difference whether the answer later on proves to be inaccurate, because our question is gone. Then there's the relaxation.
He talks about that somewhere in here where the understanding is what quiets the mind. Oh, it's right there. Oh, you're looking
Sorry,
for
I'm
the
just
title.
holding it up because someone asked me to hold the book up again.
Oh, I see.
I hope they got it. It's Cameron McColl. Maybe I need to hold up the bottom of the book, make it more visible. It's by Cameron McColl.
Oh, good. Okay, thank you. Does that answer your question, Rick? Is that clear? I mean, and also I know that you like to bring these things into to kind of focus and illuminate them for us. So thanks for that.
That's perfect. Perfect.
Good. Thank you, Rick. There's a at the top of page 203, there's a question. It says, it is easy to visualize consciousness as illuminating, but not so easy to see that the manifestation is itself that same consciousness. I mean, a brilliant statement and kind of a question. And then I love what Francis points to. The sage Krishna Menon uses the example of the faces carved in rock. This is so brilliant. He says that at first we only see the faces, and for me, I've been to Mount Rushmore a few times, and you see the faces of the presidents on Mount Rushmore. I see that, and we only see faces. After we have enjoyed them for a while, we lose interest. Relax the focus of our attention, and notice the rock in between them. When we look at the faces again, we see that they are also made out of rock. The faces represent objects, the rock in between. The faces represents witnessing consciousness, and seeing the rock in the faces represents the understanding that objects are made out of consciousness.
Yes. And that comes from this most beautiful long poem of Atmananda Krishna called Atma Darshan. And that together with his other long poem, Atma Nivriti, encapsulates the whole of the direct path teaching, because he was really the founder of the direct path. So Atmadarshan, it was published in 2 little booklets. Atmadarshan is about 14 pages long, and Atmanivriti 11 pages long, and they're unusual for books from an Indian sage, because although he originally wrote those poems in his native language, he later translated them into English himself because he spoke English very well. Unfortunately, the people who inherited, sons who inherited his estate, or maybe it's grandsons by now, believed that these teachings were too powerful to allow them to be known by people in the West. So they set up a publishing company to stop it being published, which is very unusual. So if anyone tries to put any of it on the internet, then they get a letter from his American lawyers, and people are, I think it's well out of copyright now, so I don't think they actually have a case in law at all, from what I've heard. But anyway, people do still put them on the internet, and if you look around, then you can find them. But every so often, if you find them in one place, they'll disappear. You can get them as PDFs. There are second-hand copies available, but they're sort of £500 to £1,000 each. I'll put the latest, I'll put a link to, this one worked this morning. Whether it will work this afternoon, I don't know. But they are both so absolutely beautiful and very, very clear and succinct expressions of non-duality. And that description of the faces in the rock comes from one chapter of Atma Darshan.
Cool. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. That's awesome. Yeah, we have one more question on chapter 13, Peace, the Universal Container. And the question is, or statement, it is a bit like a mirror. Oh, this was talking about the same thing. A bit like a mirror, in that the objects in the mirror are nothing but glass. And when Francis answers this, he says that he says exactly, before we realize the existence of the mirror, we are like a cat that sees another cat in the mirror and tries to catch it. When the cat bumps into the mirror, that is the equivalent of realizing the witnessing consciousness. That is, how do you say that? Nivikalpa?
Nivikalpa samadhi, yes.
Realization of the witnessing consciousness. So this would be self-realization. The experience of...
Yes. So sometimes people call Nivikalpa samadhi enlightenment, and then the establishment of the recognition of our true nature as self-realization. That tends to be nowadays a more common set of definitions. So Nivikalpa samadhi is the experience of consciousness without objects. It's the recognition that we are consciousness, but it's actually seeing and experiencing that pure consciousness without any objects present.
That would not be the neti. That would be the both.
That would be the sinking down and down and down into the depths of the ocean, or like Rumi, go down and down and down in ever widening rings of being. It would be something like that. He says, I think it's maybe a bit later on, he says it's important to to experience that, to experience consciousness in its purity without the presence of objects. And then later on, it's easy to experience consciousness as embracing objects, as being the substance of all objects, of there being no separation.
Yeah. Well, I think that is there more on chapter 13 that you want to look at, or would you like to go to 14 for the remainder of our time?
I think we could go to chapter 14 now, couldn't we, really?
Okay.
Yes.
That's on page 205 in the book. I'm not sure in Kindle.
I think it's 209 in, is it 2? No, it's 181 in Kindle.
Okay.
181, yeah.
The desire for the absolute.
Mm-hmm.
I am not afraid. Oh, this was a great answer to this question, too. I am not afraid of dying, and everything is okay. Is there more than this? You know, this is such a cliche kind of a statement, and I've thought it and I've heard it enough times to see another imposter.
Yes, yes.
He says, if what you say is completely true, that you are not afraid of dying, there is nothing more. Boom.
Yeah.
If you know what you are, that you are, I'm skipping down about halfway. If you know what you are, that you are peace itself, there is no fear, and you no longer fuel the agitation of the mind or the restlessness of the body, then the awareness of this peace that is inherent in what you are starts to shine through the layer of thoughts and feelings, and they become thinner and thinner. This means that you have no attraction whatsoever for states of mind, samadhis, or ecstatic states. If they show up, of course, you enjoy them, but they are figments of your imagination. It is for you to know whether this description matches the situation you describe.
Yes. And there's a quote from Parmenides, which he sometimes has given in satsangs. He's translated some things from Parmenides, and this bit he often quotes: being is and not being is not. And that really encapsulates the answer to this question. And the same thing in the Bhagavad Gita: that which is not never comes into being, that which is never ceases to be. So when those two statements make sense to you, then in a way that's a test of whether there is more or not.
Wow. Thank you for bringing those other two pieces in, Jenny.
Good.
There's on the next page, 206, there's a question that says, it is a relief to move out of the turmoil of desire, but it seems that one is then in a void. I heard this yesterday. I heard someone making this statement yesterday. Does one need to stay in this void for long enough to appreciate the greater reality? And then he says there are two kinds of voids, objective and subjective. I thought this was very revealing. Did you?
Yes. And the objective void, that's really another name for what we talked about earlier in this book, which is the blank state. It's really the same as that blank state. So the witness is still there, but there's blankness there as well. So you haven't got that real dissolution of subject and object, and it's boring. It might be restful, but often people think that that's the aim of meditation is to get to that blank state. They mistake that state for the real Nivikalpa samadhi, but that isn't Nivikalpa samadhi. But it's such a very common mistake to make, and I think it's quite hard for people to distinguish it. And really, you only distinguish it when suddenly you experience Nivikalpa samadhi. Think, oh, that is so different from what I was experiencing before, which I thought was it.
Yeah. That was my experience when I went to a Rupert retreat, and he invited, after the inward facing path, after a few days on the retreat, he invites you to include everything in your objective experience as also rising in awareness.
Yes.
So the subjective and the objective. It says there. It says it is. Let's see. Here, you are still looking outwards in the direction of objects. This is halfway down on that first paragraph. You are still looking outwards in the direction of objects, only to assert that there are none. That would be objective nothingness, which is an absence of characteristics. This absence still has a quality, is still a subtle object, and therefore doesn't have the real perfume. That's what you were just saying.
Yes, exactly. And that second stage of looking outwards, that's a later stage. That's sahaja samadhi. So that's when we go into Nivikalpa samadhi, and then when we come out, if we're lucky, that the perfume of that state, is the way Francis often expresses it, that remains. And so we see all objects as not separate, discrete elements of existence, but all objects as being one, just one experience, and I am that. And that's sahaja samadhi. So that's consciousness in the presence of objects, whereas Nivikalpa samadhi is consciousness in the absence of objects.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And Jenny, is this description that you just gave, is this your is this your experience?
Yes. When there are times during the day when I just feel like sinking down into pure consciousness, away from all the objects, and that's lovely, and that's restful. But most of the time during the day, then I'm engaged with ordinary activities, and there's a natural flow of attention. When I need to give attention to a specific object, I still don't see it as separate. It's still within its context, but the attention is on it or part of it, rather than on everything. But then there's a natural flow back to a sort of wholeness of experience, a oneness of experience, and so that's the sahaja samadhi, that flowing out of attention, and that and the flowing back. But then there are still some times when I just like to sit in silence and enjoy Nivikalpa samadhi.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a sort of a gradual evolution of the path, would you say?
Yes, I suppose. I mean, I don't know how the path evolves for other people. It may
Yeah,
evolve in a different way. I think that sometimes people are more oriented towards the tantric path, which is more outwards from the start, whereas for me, I was more oriented towards the inwards at the start and then outwards. So I think it evolves
yeah,
differently for different people.
yeah. That I would say that was mine as well. And there's at the top of page 207. Do we have any questions on the board that we need to pay attention to? Thank you everyone for being here, and for you all that came late, welcome. And you will get a replay link in an email within an hour after the broadcast if you want to go back and watch the entire broadcast. We have about 10 minutes left, no, 5 minutes left. The question or the comment is the idea to rest as this presence? I love this answer.
Yes.
To, right? To rest as this presence doesn't make sense. Now, I keep telling people to rest in awareness, rest as presence, rest in awareness. So I'm guilty of this statement. Boom. Because we are always this presence, whether we know it or not. However, it would make sense to rest knowingly as this presence.
Yes, and really the test, as he said, is to see whether we still have this belief in being something else, a separate entity. At any point in time, we can ask ourselves, well, what do I believe myself to be in this moment? And just that question, once we have had a glimpse of our true nature, then just that question will instantly take us back to resting knowingly as this presence. But of course, we always are, and it's just he sometimes describes it as consciousness playing the game of ignorance. And sometimes it plays the game of ignorance, and sometimes it stops playing the game. And there's nothing that a separate entity or a body mind does about that. It just happens.
Hmm. Yeah, I like what he says in the last paragraph on page 207. And he says, we don't do anything in this present. It has a dynamism of its own. We appear to collaborate with it, but the very desire to collaborate comes from the intuition of presence itself, from a glimpse. From that glimpse is the desire to collaborate. We don't choose this glimpse. So, in fact, it is only this presence collaborating with itself in order to reveal itself. There is something that is sometimes described as a deepening of this presence in time, although really that is absurd. It seems to match our experience, but it is not consistent with our understanding.
Yes, yes. And once again, he's using the word invited, which I think is really lovely. And I think of it as just saying yes and enjoying rather than collaborating. I'm not so keen personally on the idea, on the word collaborating. It has a few negative connotations, collaborators, things in the war. But I love the word invite, being invited, and just saying saying yes to that invitation,
Yeah.
and just enjoying being what I am.
Yeah. Yeah. That's the surrender.
Yes, yes.
That's the surrender that is surrenderless. Because we're not really the doer.
Yes, yes.
Well, we've come to the end of our time, everyone. Thank you for being here, and thank you for joining us. If you're new to this group, usually we have 45, 50 people. We have a lot more today because Francis brought you here. Thank you for coming. And we are in week 26. We'll go to about August the 24th with this book study. Then we'll have about a month pause or 6-week pause, and then we're going to move into Rupert Spira's book study, where he's invited me to host his book study, and we'll bring it here into this Pure Presence group. And looking forward to being with all of you here. Oh, and we also we're putting together the conference that is titled Integrated Awakening, that is September 17, 18, and 19. And our speaker list is growing. It's a great list of presenters that will be here for you, and Pure Presence conferences. And I'll be announcing that probably in a couple of weeks. We're putting together the website right now. And the speakers are saying yes, and we're very excited about that. So thanks for being here for the Pure Presence book study. Thank you, Jenny, for being the awesomeness that you are. And everyone else, thank you all also. And thanks to Richard. He's always our tech support behind Jenny. We love you both. And thank you all. We'll see you next week for the rest of chapter 14, and we'll move a little bit into 15.
Thank you, Bill. Thank